the weekly show with David J. Maloney.
This week, David chats with legendary actor George Chakiris.
And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the weekly show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. On tonight, we got the next part of my interview with legendary Academy Award-winning actor George Chakiris. There was a time when Hollywood truly felt like a dream factory, when Technicolor musicals filled the screen with song, dance, and starlight. George lived right in the heart of that golden age. He began his career dancing alongside icons like Marilyn Monroe in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Rosemary Clooney in White Christmas before stepping into the spotlight himself. In 1961, he gave the world one of the most unforgettable performances as Bernardo in West Side Story, a role which earned him both an Academy Award and a Golden Globe, and which forever etched his name in Hollywood history. His artistry didn't stop there. He went on to captivate audiences on stage, on television, and even in the world of design. He's one of the last living links to that era of elegance and cinematic magic. Tonight, we welcome back the legendary George Chakiris. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. So you then go on to have an accomplished career with pictures spanning decades and countless television roles. Is there a particular role you're most proud of? Is it from West Side Story, either the theater version or the movie, or is it some other role? Is there a role that you're most proud of?
Well, I'll tell you, there in film, there are two other films I made that I am, I guess, proud of, and I was glad to be in. One is The Young Girls of Rochefort, a musical, and the other one was a Babel's Girl, made in Italy with Claudio Cardinale, and it was wonderful. In the 60s were a really big decade for Italian cinema, and this the director was Luigi Comencini. Just anyway, that I loved working on that so much. It's based on a true story, and Claudio was great. It was a very I don't know who thought of me for that film. I've never known, because it just came out of the blue. And but I was very happy that I got to do it. In theater, I've done a lot of theater over the years with some really wonderful people. So, but it all started with West Side Story, and that put me, quote unquote, on the map, you know, and the popularity of West Side Story in the world was pretty strong. You know, I've worked in France with French people. I've worked in Japan with Japanese people on wonderful stuff for NHK, for TBS, and West Side Story played at the Georges V Theater on the Champs-Élysées for 5 years, and outside the theater, what they had was a huge poster of me. And I hope you won't mind my telling you this, because I am kind of blowing my horn. But once, some years later, I was in Japan watching, in the theater, watching a performance of West Side Story, an American group. They're all from New York, and they're all just really wonderful. And I was invited to just sit in the audience and watch it. Well, when the audience found out that I was there, they all stood up to applaud me where I was sitting, and they wouldn't stop. I had to leave so that they could start the show. But I say that because that's the kind of reaction I was getting worldwide for the role of Bernardo, you know.
Well, it was people super appreciated it, and the role and the production. Is there, which makes me think, is there a role of yours or a production that you were in that you wish had been, that people should appreciate more? In other words, if I've got audience members, that somebody should go look up and watch today because it was so good and it just didn't get the attention it deserved.
Right. I did a British a miniseries at the BBC. It was called Notorious Woman. It was on the life of Georges Sand, the French novelist. Rosemary Harris, she's so amazing. She played Georges Sand, and believe it or not, I played Frederick Chopin. You know, the way that happened was so extraordinary to me. But now and again, someone will say, you know, I like doing West Side Story, but I really, and they'll mention, and it makes me feel good when someone thinks of something else that's not just West Side Story, but it really was a wonderful, beautifully done miniseries. You know, it's so interesting. I was in London and I made a movie for American television, and it was like I finished in like October or something like that. And you know, in England, in the theater community, people do Sunday brunches and things like that. And I thought, and I finished working on this film, and I thought, well, I should do a brunch, you know. And I did, and I had someone who helped me, of course, because I didn't know what to do. But one of the people, she knew, her name was Irene Finch, and she knew everybody in the theater. And she invited a man whose name was Peter Rogers. And he was a producer at the BBC. He had also started Chichester with Laurence Olivier. So this was all really important, wonderful people, you know. And I was talking to him during this brunch, and just nothing in particular. And I remember he said, we all knew he was doing this series. He was supposed to with Anne Bancroft and a change and became Rosemary Harris. But he said to me during that lunch, he said, I think you might be good for the Italian Doctor. Well, I don't know that history, you know, so I probably didn't say anything. But when I got home, well, I got home in December, and in January, he called me and told me I had the role of Frederick Chopin in his series. I didn't test. I didn't do anything. I didn't look like. The reason I love this story, because it shows the wonderful imagination that people can have in doing something that's different. That's not the right way. But it took, I think, great imagination on his part to see me as Frederick Chopin. But I was happy that he did. But that's one of the things that I've done that if people, you know, it's too long ago now, most people don't remember that at all. But some now and again people did, and I was glad to hear that they liked that as well as West Side Story or anything else. You know,
Speaking of you know, movies, television, you know, theater, television, especially, you ended up in the last episode of The Partridge Family.
Yeah.
I found that was interesting because there you are opposite Shirley Jones. And I don't know if that was a full circle moment or not, but she was the one who presented you with your Academy Award. I remember that. I was like, well, that's a coincidence. Was it a coincidence? Or did one have something to do with the other?
Well, let's see. After West Side Story, there was a woman whose name was Ruth Aarons who wanted to represent me, and ultimately she did. But she also represented Shirley. So when they were doing the Partridge Family, and then of course she ultimately represented David. She got the family. So I got to know everybody socially, going to Shirley's house and meeting Jack, and just nice times. So for that last episode, they cast me, and I guess it did kind of feel like a full circle. But Shirley is such a wonderful person. She's one of the best, you know. But I didn't know that when I was doing that it was the last episode. I was just that I've heard since that it was, and you know, like you just said, and I guess a lot of people who loved that series remember specific things, specifics, excuse me, like, oh, it's the last episode, you know.
You know, you're one of the remaining members of a certain like gold, what they call that golden era of Hollywood. Is there something from those early years you wish Hollywood would hold on to and not lose sight of as the years move forward?
Well, I think I guess there are problems with any system, so to speak, but the studio system. I'm not an expert on this, but with Del Lefzana and whoever was at Universal, and whoever was at Paramount, and so on, they were studio films. Well, Paramount was basically was independent producers, but for example, films were now every film I think is independently made. And that creates a different kind of atmosphere. And because I remember, for example, when you go to dinner somewhere, there's a wonderful restaurant there called Chasen's, which is closed now. But for now, you could go to Chasen's and you would see all kinds of people that you didn't know, but it was kind of like a family. There was an intimacy to people who didn't and did and knew each other. Now I wouldn't know anybody. But listen, the studio system made some really wonderful, wonderful movies, but independent producers make really wonderful movies too. I mean, for me, I guess going back to those times, the thing that stands out in my mind was how much I loved being a chorus dancer in some of those movie musicals, especially, of course, with Marilyn, a historical number. But I guess I'm thinking of when times were easier and softer and more naive or something like that, and no harshness and stuff like that. It was but Los Angeles or Hollywood was kind of it did feel like a family, whether you knew people or not, and there was a connection whether you knew them or not. And I'm sure that doesn't exist today.
Do you think we lose something as a society or culture by losing support for the arts like dance? I mean, what do you say to those whom are unsure about the value of things like dance when it comes to things like public funding and whatnot?
Yes. Listen, dance as an art form is just so extraordinary and so beautiful. And what dancers, male and female, have to go through to be able to do that, and for a limited time, because that's a short career, basically, and because you need physical strength to start with. But I think funding for the arts is vital for the arts period, and certainly for dance. And it's the beauty, it's the feeling, it's the how much it affects us and affects our lives and changes our lives too. So I think the arts, all of them, are absolutely vital, and I think should be always. We do, helped financially because it's hard to start a ballet company and it costs money, So I think if the arts, all of the arts, and maybe especially that one, could be helped by the government as well, that would be a good thing. We always have had over the years, like for someone like Lucia Chase, and more recently, a woman whose name was Gloria Kaufman, wealthy people who have made contributions to many things happen in the arts. So that wasn't government funded, but was privately done. But again, those are people who loved the arts And if they had the money, I guess they helped it along. Gloria Kaufman passed away very recently, and I knew her. She was great. She started the school at USC that is doing very well. It's a dance school, but it's much more than that. But it took someone like her to make it happen. But it would be nice if people in the political world would appreciate the arts too.
George, as you look back on your story, there are some other people with Hollywood stories like yours, but not a ton of them. I mean, so frequently when you look at who succeeds in the business, sometimes there's connections there's connections, you know what I mean? And in yours, it seems like a certain number of butterfly effects certain things had to happen for other things to happen. And if they don't, your life takes a completely different path. It seems to me as if, you had to have some of these things happen, but when we talk today, you keep going back to the work, the love of the work, the love of the work, the love of the work. When you look back at your life, what are the lessons that you hope people will take away from it? People who want to get into the business and do it. Is it the love of the work? Is it the discipline? Is it a combination of them? Is there something else that I'm missing, an ingredient that I'm failing to mention?
Well, no, it absolutely is the love of the work and the discipline, yes. And everybody needs the opportunity. Years ago, I was in London watching a graduation performance from one of the drama schools from Lambda, and they were doing a musical called Little Me. And those kids were, without exception, they were so wonderful, And I remember thinking to myself, who in this group is going to get lucky? You have to get lucky. You have to get lucky, because you can't, if you're not producing yourself, you're hoping luck will come your way, and to do something will then allow you to continue doing things and doing more things. But you do need to be lucky. But absolutely the love of the work and the discipline. Those two things I think are vital for anybody, I guess, in any business. But in performing, the performing arts, yeah, you have to, and I think that's why I go back to working in the chorus, because I loved it. I loved it, and it was more naive. I really loved it.
So we talked about all those arts, but you've also another area of the arts that you're working in is jewelry. So tell us about that.
I don't remember how I started that, but somehow I did. And there's a school between here and downtown LA. It's a Frank Lloyd Wright building called Barnsdall, and they teach classes in sculpture and jewelry and pottery and different things. And when I heard about that school, I thought, jewelry sounds like, and so that's how I started my jewelry, by taking classes at Barnsdall and just falling in love with I fell in love with silver, especially because it's even in jewelry, you're doing it really for someone else. Like when you perform, you're hoping the audience will like it. But jewelry is the same thing. You make something, and you hope someone else will like it. So I don't remember. That's how I started. I remember that the very first class I took, the teacher said, "Now don't mess with gold. You're just starting. Just do silver." So I started with silver and stayed with silver, and over time I got to know the jewelry district downtown pretty well, and I had a manufacturer with. Things just kind of evolved, as you meet people along the way. And I also eventually had a really wonderful manufacturer in Thailand. But Thailand is a long way away. But anyway, I fell in love. I have a freestanding garage that I turned into a studio because as I learned to know what to do, I learned how to deal with metal and soldering and all of that stuff, and the wax and the different ways to create jewelry. But I had and I turned my freestanding garage into a studio where I could work. And I had a little dog, a little Italian greyhound, and he could come and sit there and be with me all day, and I could be here and not downtown. The jewelry thing was kind of slow to evolve, but once I started and saw how beautiful something could be, I was hooked, and I really, really loved making some of the things. Some of the things were nice, and some of the things not so nice. But again, it's a creative endeavor, and it's limitless.
You've got your book too, which expounds on everything we've discussed today and obviously more. Tell us about the book.
Well, gosh, when I think now of the book, I wish I had done more with the book, because I remember so much more after the book was done, because there was a stop date on the book that it had to be ready by a certain day. But in the book, I worked with a wonderful writer whose name is Lindsay Harrison, and Lindsay did the writing. I'll say I did some. But and she had done books with Tippi Hedren and different. She had done books with other wonderful people. So she was absolutely really wonderful to work with. But she could only she had to deal with what I had told her, and what I remembered or didn't remember. And since the book has been out, once in a while I think, oh my God, how did I not remember that? Or I forgot lots of stuff that might have been fun to include.
George, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, I'll tell you what, you do us a favor, because you can see how much we love talking about things we've done. Someone has to have an interest to ask those questions, and that's always appreciated, Yeah.
Well, like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, George Chakiris. That is our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to actor George Chakiris for joining us. Stay safe, everyone.